Welcome to Ustick Road Church of the Nazarene in Caldwell, Idaho. And now your speaker, special guest Brianna Dyer.
So this week was about camp. And so I was trying to think in the Bible of camps that we read about. And I thought, maybe, kiddos, eyes up here. And I thought maybe we should talk about the Israelites because they camped. They're pretty good at it, or maybe we could talk about someone who just, was out a lot. But I realized, one of the biggest events that we talk about, at least when we're telling stories of children, happened in a camp. And it's the story of David and Goliath. I'm going to actually read it, which was kind of weird to me because I'm so used to retelling stories, but I'm going to read it straight from the Bible. So 1 Samuel 17, 1 through 50. Now the Philistines gathered their forces for war and assembled at Socoh in Judah. They pitched camp at Ephes Dammim between Socoh and Ascah. Saul and the Israelites assembled and camped in the valley of Elah and drew up their battle line to meet the Philistines. The Philistines accompanied one hill and the Israelites another with the valley between them. A champion named Goliath, who was from Gath, came out of the Philistine camp. He was over 9 feet tall. He had a bronze helmet on his head and wore a coat of scale armor of bronze, weighing 5,000 shekels. On his legs he wore bronze greaves, and a bronze javelin was slung on his back. His spear shaft was like a weaver's rod, and its iron point weighed 600 shekels. His shield bearer went ahead of him. Goliath stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why do you come out and line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine, and are you not the servants of Saul? Choose a man and have him come down to me. If he is able to fight and kill me, we will become your subjects. But if I overcome him and kill him, you will become our subjects and serve us." Then the Philistine said, "This day I defy the ranks of Israel. Give me a man and let us fight each other." On hearing the Philistines' words, Saul and the Israelites were dismayed and terrified. Now David was the son of an Ephraite called Jesse, who was from Bethlehem in Judah. Jesse had 8 sons, and in Saul's time he was old and well advanced in years. Jesse's 3 oldest sons had followed Saul to the war. The firstborn was Eliab, the second Abinadab, and the third Shammah. David was the youngest. The 3 oldest followed Saul, but David went back and forth from Saul to tend his father's sheep at Bethlehem. For 40 days the Philistine came forward every morning and evening and took his stand. Now Jesse said to his son David, "Take this ephah of roasted grain and these 10 loaves of bread for your brothers and hurry to their camp. Take along these 10 cheeses to the commander of their unit. See how your brothers are and bring back some assurance from them. They are with Saul and all the men of Israel in the valley of Elah, fighting against the Philistines." Early in the morning, David left the flock with a shepherd, loaded up and set out as Jesse had directed. He reached the camp as the army was going out to its battle position, shouting the war cry. Israel and the Philistines were drawing up their lines facing each other. David left his things with the keeper of the supplies, ran to the battle lines, and greeted his brothers. As he was talking with them, Goliath, the Philistine champion from Gath, stepped out from his line and shouted his usual defiance, and David heard it. When the Israelites saw the man, they all ran from him in great fear. Now the Israelites had been saying, "Do you see how this man keeps coming out? He comes out to defy Israel. The king will give great wealth to the man who kills him. He will give him his daughter in marriage and will exempt his father's family from taxes in Israel." David asked the man standing near him, "What will be done for the man who kills the Philistine and removes this disgrace from Israel? Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" They repeated to him what they had been saying and told him, "This is what will be done for the man who kills him." When Eliab, David's oldest brother, heard him speaking with the men, he burned with anger at him and asked, "Why have you come down here? And with whom did you leave those few sheep in the desert? I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. You came down only to watch the battle." "Now what have I done?" said David. "Can't I even speak?" He then turned away to someone else and brought up the same matter, and the men answered him as before. What David said was overheard and reported to Saul, and Saul sent for him. Doesn't that sound like a brother and like two brothers? Like, hey, you're just a punk. Oh, well, I can't even talk. I'm not even talking to you anymore. It sounds so brother-esque. And Saul sent for him. David said to Saul, "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him." Saul replied, "You are not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You're only a boy, and he has been fighting a fighting man from his youth." But David said to Saul, "Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine." Saul said to David, "Go, and the Lord will be with you." Then Saul dressed David in his own tunic. He put a coat of armor on him and a bronze helmet on his head. David fastened on his sword over the tunic and tried walking around because he was not used to them. "I cannot go in these," he said to Saul, "because I'm not used to them." So he took them off. Then he took his staff in his hand, chose 5 smooth stones from the stream, put them in the pouch of his shepherd's bag, and, with his sling in his hand, approached the Philistine. Meanwhile, the Philistine, with his shield bearer in front of him, kept coming closer to David. He looked David over and saw that he was only a boy, ruddy and handsome, and he despised him. He said to David, "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. "Come here," he said, "and I'll give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field." David said to the Philistine, "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will hand you over to me, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. Today I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds of the air and the beasts of the earth, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. All those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands." As the Philistine moved closer to attack him, David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet him. Reaching into his bag and taking out a stone, he slung it and struck the Philistine on the forehead. The stone sank into his forehead, and he fell face down on the ground. So David triumphed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone. Without a sword in his hand, he struck down the Philistine and killed him. Maybe I just don't read the Bible because I can't read the names. So when we begin this story in chapter 17, the first thing that it tells us is it tells us where the camps had been set up. Where had the Israelites camped, and where had the Philistines camped? Where had they set up camp? Throughout the Bible, whenever there's about to be a battle, it tells you where they went and set up camp. So I titled this, "Where's Your Camp?" Because a camp signifies a battleground. So you had to set up the camp where the battle was going to take place. When we read this, we're able, obviously, I don't know where these places are because I don't even know how to say the names, but I could go look and figure out where this was, right? It signifies where this battle happened. We have this, right? We have this all over the world now. With all of these different wars that we've had, we have battlegrounds set up. And there are camps. There were camps set up in those places because that camp is where you're going to fight. We each have a battleground, and we each have a camp that we've set up. Because I think that it's ignorant for us to believe that there's not a battle that is going to take a long time, right? If it's like a 10-second battle, you're not going to set up a camp. A camp is for a battle that's going to take time, that's going to be exhausting, that's going to wear on you, that you're going to need supplies, that you're going to need to be able to sleep. And so for me, a battleground is this idea of a really long battle that we have, that we fight. And I think we each have those in our own places. And so we've each set up a camp somewhere. But what we as individuals, and especially as a church, have to make sure is that we don't make the battlefield lonely for others. David was in the right place because he went to make sure that people were safe in their camps. So yeah, David had to go fight a lion and a bear, but he also made sure that the battlefield, that his brothers knew they were cared for, right? They had food, they had provisions, they were being checked on. And I think this is really huge for us as Christians. We have to make sure that we are meeting people in the trenches. We're meeting people in their camps. We're saying, are you okay? What's going on? Who's the Philistine in your life, right? Goliath's name is only mentioned once. We know his name, but after that first time of identifying him, he's simply the Philistine. He doesn't have the right to be called anything. And so no matter what you're fighting, the defining characteristic is how you fight, right? The defining piece of the story is how David fought, not how Goliath fought. Goliath is not the part of the story that matters. He's simply the adversary. And so what we have to make sure we're doing is that we remind people in those moments, yeah, this Philistine looks gigantic and terrifying, and they're mean, but they are just a Philistine. That's all they are. And that can only happen if we go to the battlefield, if we go to others' camps to be with them. But you have to be prepared. So David had training. He didn't know that his training was going to be to kill a giant, right? All he knew was that he went and he was a shepherd and he would take care of the sheep. He would take care of them from bears and lions. And so he had the training. God had prepared him for this moment. We have to prepare. And sometimes we don't know we're preparing. Sometimes it's more about following God and being where you have been placed to prepare you for a battle that you don't know is going to happen. But at the end of the day, David had to use what God had given him, not what he had given Saul. Saul tries to say, okay, well, you can put on my armor. And it always makes me think of the VeggieTales, David and Goliath, where he's like squished with all of Saul's armor. You know, Saul was a warrior. Saul had been prepared. God had given Saul skills and had helped Saul prepare in different ways than David. But if David had gone out there in Saul's armor, in Saul's strength, with Saul's preparation, he would not have been able to win. He had to go in the strength and in the skills and in the preparedness of himself that God had given him. But ultimately, the battle belongs to the Lord, no matter where it ends up being. Later on in 2 Samuel, as Dad has been reading, we see that David has a lot of battles. He doesn't just stop after this moment with this Philistine, right? He has battles with himself, with his own lust. He has battles with his children. He is a man enthroned in war and in battle. Because wherever your camp is set up, the devil will find a way to bring a battle there. So sometimes what I think we have to do is we have to make sure that we don't make it easy. Like, there are places that if you go there, obviously there's going to be a battle, right? Obviously, if I go somewhere that is doing things that are sinful, doing things that I know that God has tempted me with, I'm going to have a battle there. So what's the smartest thing to do? To pull away from those things, right? The smartest thing David could have done was not be near Bathsheba. He didn't, and see what happened? A lot of terrible things happened. So one of, I think, the biggest things is that the battle does belong to the Lord, but no matter where you are, there will be a battle. The devil's not going to just let you go. He's not a pacifist. And so you have to make sure that in your own strength, you're taking the steps that you can, that you're taking the steps to be away from things that are tempting, that you're away from things that are compromising. We live in a world that compromises us daily. We live in a world where it's really easy. The access to things that are sinful is like so easy. It's harder in some ways to get to things that aren't. And so we have to pull ourselves to a place where we have set up a camp in a place that we know we can get help, in a place that we know people can come see us, because we know a battle is going to be there. But no matter what battle, the battle does belong to the Lord. You can't always be prepared for each battle, but you can always prepare to give God the battle. David has a lot of battles, and the ones he wins are the ones he gives to God, and the ones he loses are the ones he doesn't give to God. The battles that David loses are the ones he tries to win in his own strength. The ones that we see where David is actually powerful, where David is a king that kills 10,000 men, is when he gives the battle to the Lord. And that happens on a daily basis. Maybe you're not struggling with something huge. Maybe you're struggling with something tiny. Maybe it's that you just are like, sometimes I get real frustrated. That should be given to God. And that's how we prepare to give the huge battles to God, is by giving him daily the things that are in our lives, the battlefields that we have, the things that are already wrong. We give those to God daily to prepare for the huge battles that will come our way, because the devil knows that we're powerful if we give them to God. So he's going to make sure that we don't. So as I was thinking about this week, just with camp, we are preparing our children to set up camp in places that are safe, to set up camp and know that they can always call for help. But that starts with us as adults setting up camp in places that are healthy, showing them, there are things that are hard. There are moments in my life that I struggle. There are places that the devil has me, and I pull myself away from those places and I camp somewhere else. And the only way for us to empower our kids is if we empower each other first. I think sometimes we say, we have to do all this stuff for the kids, but the best thing that you can do for these kids, for the kids in your life, is be an example. What does it look like to read your Bible every day? What does it look like to struggle and be vulnerable? What does it look like to love others? What do those things look like? That's the best thing that we can do. And the best thing we can do is set up camp in places we know God is going to give us power, and to give those battles to God long before they're huge, right?
Thanks for joining us today. You can find Ustick Road Church of the Nazarene on the web at usticknaz.org and on many social media sites at usticknaz. Thanks, and God bless.